Don't touch it. The command cracked through the polished hotel entrance before the black leather wallet had even stopped spinning across the marble floor. Every conversation in the grand lobby died at once. Bellhops froze beside polished brass luggage carts. Guests turned their heads. The revolving glass doors whispered to a stop as sunlight poured across the spotless floor, illuminating the wallet lying only a few feet from a young black maid whose cleaning cart still stood beside a row of towering white columns. Ava Brooks looked down at it for only a heartbeat. Thick bundles of $100 bills peeked from one side, while several platinum credit cards reflected the morning light like tiny mirrors. She never reached for the cash. She simply bent carefully, lifted the wallet with both hands, and glanced toward the tall man striding across the lobby without realizing what he had left behind. Richard Sterling, one of the wealthiest businessmen in America, moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to every door opening before he reached it. His charcoal suit looked perfectly tailored, his silver hair immaculate despite the humid Charleston morning outside, and his attention remained fixed on the urgent phone conversation flowing through the wireless earpiece hidden beneath one ear. Behind him, two security agents followed several paces back, while the hotel manager hurried nervously alongside, trying to keep pace. None of them noticed the missing wallet. Ava did. "Sir," she called, her voice respectful but clear enough to echo beneath the enormous crystal chandelier hanging above the lobby. Richard never looked back. His limousine already waited outside beneath the covered entrance. The driver had opened the rear passenger door, and one security guard had already stepped forward to shield his employer from the growing crowd of reporters gathering across the street. Ava hesitated for barely a second before pushing her cleaning cart against the wall and hurrying after him, the wallet held carefully against her apron with both hands as though it belonged in a museum instead of her grasp. "Sir, you dropped your wallet," she called again. This time Richard turned halfway, irritation flashing across his face before recognition ever reached his eyes. His gaze fell immediately to the wallet in her hands. Everything around them seemed to tighten. One security guard stepped directly between them. Another instinctively extended an arm, blocking Ava several feet away. Hotel guests stopped walking altogether. A woman carrying expensive shopping bags whispered something to her husband, while another guest quietly lifted a phone, curiosity replacing conversation. Richard's expression remained unreadable, but the silence around him carried the weight of suspicion. "Don't touch it," he repeated, slower this time, his voice controlled, measured, and cold enough to drain every trace of warmth from the bright summer morning. Ava stopped immediately, her breathing slightly heavier from running across nearly half the lobby. She lowered her eyes for a moment, then gently extended both hands, offering the wallet forward without taking another step. She never argued. She never defended herself. She simply waited, standing in her plain housekeeping uniform beneath the glittering chandelier, while dozens of strangers watched a woman who had done nothing except choose honesty before anyone else even realized something valuable had been lost. Richard Sterling accepted the wallet without a word. His fingers closed around the worn black leather, but instead of opening it immediately, he looked directly at Ava as though trying to solve a puzzle that did not make sense. She stood quietly beneath the hotel entrance with her hands folded in front of her apron, her breathing finally steady again after running nearly half the length of the lobby. Around them, the crowd remained unusually silent. Nobody seemed eager to leave. People were waiting to see what happened next. Richard gave a slight nod toward one of his security agents. The man stepped forward politely but firmly. "Please wait here, ma'am." Ava simply nodded. "Of course, sir." There was no fear in her voice, only patience. She had heard that tone before. It was the sound people used when they believed caution mattered more than trust. Richard slowly opened the wallet. Every bill remained perfectly aligned. The platinum cards sat exactly where they belonged. His driver's license, insurance cards, business credentials, and family photographs were untouched. He counted nothing because he already knew what should have been inside. Everything appeared exactly as he remembered. Even so, his eyes narrowed slightly. He closed the wallet again without saying thank you. "What is your name?" he finally asked. "Ava Brooks, sir." "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 3 years." Richard glanced toward the hotel manager, who had finally caught up, slightly out of breath. "Is she one of yours?" The manager nodded immediately. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." Ava is part of our housekeeping team. Always on time. Never any complaints. Richard looked back at Ava, studying her calm expression. She did not look offended by the questions. She did not seem eager for recognition either. She simply waited. The marble beneath her shoes reflected the morning sunlight pouring through the towering glass windows, making the entire entrance glow with a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with the cool distance in Richard's voice. "Did you open it?" he asked. Ava answered honestly, without hesitation. "Only enough to see if there was identification, so I could make sure it reached the right person." One security guard exchanged a quick glance with the other. Richard remained expressionless. "Did you remove anything?" "No, sir." "Did you add anything?" The question surprised several people standing nearby. Ava blinked once before gently shaking her head. "No, sir." Richard slipped the wallet into the inside pocket of his jacket. "Very well." His words were polite, yet strangely empty. Then he turned toward the waiting limousine as though the matter had already ended. Ava offered a small smile that barely reached her tired eyes. "I'm glad it made it back to you." She walked quietly toward her cleaning cart without looking behind her. Within seconds, she was wiping fingerprints from the brass elevator doors again, almost invisible among the movement of guests checking in and out of the hotel. It was as though the last few minutes had never happened. Richard paused with one hand, resting on the open limousine door. For reasons he could not explain, he glanced back through the enormous glass entrance. Ava was already polishing another surface with careful, practiced motions, giving every detail the same attention she had given to returning something that was never hers. She never looked toward the parking area again. She had already returned to work, unaware that inside the jacket resting over Richard Sterling's shoulder, the wallet carried something neither of them had yet discovered. The black limousine disappeared into downtown Charleston traffic, its polished surface reflecting the bright southern sun as Richard Sterling settled into the rear seat, without saying a word. His assistant sat across from him reviewing schedules on a tablet, while the city rolled quietly past the tinted windows. Another board meeting waited in less than 20 minutes, followed by interviews, investment briefings, and a charity luncheon that had been planned months in advance. Richard normally used every minute between appointments to prepare. Today, however, his attention drifted back to the hotel lobby. He could still picture Ava Brooks standing beneath the chandelier with both hands extended, offering back something that could have changed her own life if she had chosen differently. He dismissed the thought and reached into his jacket for the wallet. Habit more than curiosity made him inspect its contents again. He opened the leather fold slowly. The familiar scent of aged leather mixed with fresh coffee lingering inside the vehicle. Cash remained untouched. Credit cards rested in perfect order. Family photographs sat exactly where they always had. His driver's license remained tucked behind the transparent sleeve. Then his fingers paused. Something felt different. Between two business cards rested a small folded piece of white paper. Richard frowned. He had never placed a note there. He carefully removed it, studying the neat fold before opening it. His assistant noticed the change in his expression. "Is everything all right, sir?" Richard did not answer immediately. The paper was ordinary, torn neatly from a small housekeeping notepad. The handwriting was careful, steady, almost elegant. There was no signature, no phone number, no request for money, no plea for a reward. Only one sentence. "Your daughter called 5 times while you were in your meeting. I thought you would want to know before it was too late." Richard stared at the words. For several seconds the sounds of traffic, the low hum of the engine, and the distant horns outside seemed to disappear entirely. His heart tightened in a way he had not expected. He reached for his phone almost instinctively. The screen illuminated his face. 5 missed calls. Every one of them from Emily. His 26-year-old daughter almost never called repeatedly unless something truly mattered. Beneath the missed calls waited 2 unread voice messages. Richard pressed the first one. Emily's voice came through softly, trying to sound calm despite the worry beneath every word. "Dad, if you get this, please call me when you can. It is important." He immediately opened the second message. Her breathing sounded uneven this time. "Dad, I really hope you see this before this afternoon. I need you here." Richard lowered the phone without speaking. The city outside continued moving exactly as before, but inside the car, everything had changed. His assistant quietly looked away, sensing that this moment belonged only to him. Richard read the handwritten note again. The words carried no judgment. Whoever had written them had simply noticed what everyone else had ignored. He closed his eyes briefly and remembered Ava standing quietly beside her cleaning cart, invisible to nearly everyone passing through the hotel, except when suspicion suddenly made every eye turn toward her. She had seen the flashing screen while picking up the wallet. She had realized something was important. Instead of interrupting his conversation or demanding attention, she had quietly left him the only thing that truly mattered. Richard looked down at the folded note resting in his palm. For the first time that morning, he realized the most valuable thing returned inside that wallet had never been the money. Richard looked out the window for only a second before making his decision. "Cancel the board meeting," he said quietly. His assistant blinked in surprise. In 8 years of working together, she had never heard those words. "Sir, the directors have already arrived." Richard folded the note carefully and slipped it back inside the wallet. "They can wait." His voice remained calm, but something inside it had softened. He pressed Emily's number. The call connected on the second ring. "Dad." Her voice carried both relief and exhaustion. Richard closed his eyes. "I am here, sweetheart. Tell me what is happening." There was a brief silence before she answered. "The doctors moved my procedure up. They said they found something they want to treat sooner than expected. I was afraid you would not get my messages." Richard stared through the windshield as Charleston traffic crawled beneath a cloudless afternoon sky. He remembered every postponed dinner, every missed birthday celebration, every promise to spend more time together after just one more meeting. Somehow there had always been another meeting, another deal, another urgent decision. "I am coming," he said firmly. "Right now." Emily let out a slow breath that sounded almost like a quiet laugh. "Thank you, Dad." The call ended, leaving only the gentle hum of the luxury sedan. Richard leaned back against the leather seat and looked once more at the folded note. It had not accused him. It had not embarrassed him. It had simply reminded him of something he should never have forgotten. Across town, Ava Brooks continued her shift exactly as every other weekday. She polished fingerprints from elevator mirrors, replaced fresh towels in guest suites, and greeted strangers with the same warm smile whether they acknowledged her or not. Most guests passed without making eye contact. Some thanked her politely. Others walked by as though she were simply another piece of hotel furniture. None of it bothered her anymore. She had learned long ago that dignity did not depend on being noticed. During her short lunch break, she sat alone outside the employee entrance beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Her lunch fit neatly inside a small reusable container packed before sunrise. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, a bottle of water. She opened a worn paperback novel while a warm breeze carried the scent of salt water from the nearby harbor. Her phone buzzed with a message from her younger brother, Marcus. Classes were going well. He had passed another engineering exam. Ava smiled to herself. Every extra shift, every early morning, every aching evening had been worth helping him stay in school. She slipped the phone back into her apron pocket without mentioning the unusual events from earlier that day. To her, returning the wallet had never been something extraordinary. It was simply the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Richard's driver turned toward Charleston Memorial Medical Center instead of the financial district. Towering glass buildings gave way to quiet streets lined with oak trees draped in Spanish moss. As the hospital entrance came into view, Richard held the wallet once more. His thumb rested against the folded note hidden inside. For decades, he had measured value through numbers, investments, and contracts. Yet one simple sentence written by someone earning an hourly wage had redirected an entire day and perhaps something much larger. As the limousine rolled to a gentle stop beneath the hospital canopy, Richard remained seated for one final moment, realizing that sometimes the greatest fortunes entered a person's life without costing a single dollar. Emily was sitting beside the wide hospital window when Richard quietly stepped into her room. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the polished floor, wrapping everything in a warm golden glow that softened the cold white walls and humming medical equipment. She looked up, surprised for only a second before the worry on her face dissolved into a smile that reminded him of the little girl who had once waited by the front door every evening just to hear his car pull into the driveway. Richard crossed the room without speaking and gently embraced his daughter. It had been longer than either of them wanted to admit since they had shared a moment that simple. Emily rested her head against his shoulder and whispered, "You actually came." Richard closed his eyes. I should have been here long before today. She smiled softly. You are. Here now. That is what matters. The words settled heavily inside him. For years he had believed success meant never slowing down, never missing an opportunity, never allowing emotion to interrupt business. Yet standing beside his daughter, surrounded by quiet, beeping monitors instead of polished conference tables, he realized how fragile those priorities had become. A physician entered moments later with reassuring news. The procedure remained important, but because Richard had arrived early, he would have time to speak with Emily before she was taken downstairs. Had he continued to his board meeting first, he almost certainly would have missed her. The doctor excused himself, leaving father and daughter alone once more. Emily glanced toward the jacket draped over the nearby chair. You came straight from work, did not you? Richard nodded. Actually, someone reminded me what mattered more. He reached into the inside pocket and unfolded the small handwritten note. Emily read it carefully before looking back at him. Who wrote this? Richard answered honestly. A hotel housekeeper. Emily smiled with quiet admiration. She noticed something everyone else ignored. Richard looked down at the paper again. Including me. Across town, the afternoon shift at the hotel moved steadily toward evening. Ava finished preparing a luxury suite overlooking Charleston Harbor. She smoothed the final corner of the bedspread, checked every polished surface one last time, and quietly wheeled her card into the hallway. As she waited for the service elevator, two co-workers chatted nearby about the excitement from that morning. One of them laughed softly. I heard that Billionaire probably thought she wanted a reward. The other shrugged. People like him usually expect something in return. Ava simply smiled to herself without joining the conversation. She had expected nothing then, and she expected nothing now. Her satisfaction had come the moment she returned what did not belong to her. She pressed the elevator button and watched the brushed steel doors slide open with a gentle chime. The mirrored walls reflected her housekeeping uniform, her neatly tied hair, and the quiet confidence she carried without ever noticing it herself. At that very moment, several miles away, Richard folded the note once again with extraordinary care. It no longer felt like an ordinary piece of paper. It had become a reminder that true character often revealed itself in the smallest decisions, the ones no cameras captured and no headlines celebrated. He slipped the note safely back into his wallet, but unlike before, he did not close it immediately. Resting beside the handwritten message was Ava's employee identification card, accidentally tucked into the same pocket when she had hurriedly returned the wallet. Richard stared at the photograph for several long seconds before quietly saying to himself, I owe her far more than a thank you. The following morning arrived wrapped in a gentle gray mist drifting inland from Charleston Harbor. Moisture clung to the hotel windows like tiny pearls, softening the first rays of sunlight until the entire lobby glowed with a quiet silver warmth. Ava Brooks arrived 30 minutes before her shift, just as she always did. She tied her housekeeping apron neatly, pinned her employee badge above her heart, and quietly began wiping fingerprints from the enormous glass entrance before the first guests appeared. The building slowly awakened around her. Coffee machines hummed behind the cafe counter. Fresh flowers filled the air with the faint scent of lilies. Suitcases rolled across polished marble, while distant elevator chimes echoed through the peaceful lobby. It was the kind of ordinary morning that most people would forget before lunchtime, and Ava preferred it that way. She believed there was something comforting about ordinary days. They reminded her that kindness was not meant for special occasions. It belonged in the quiet moments when nobody was watching. She paused briefly beside the front windows and looked outside. The harbor shimmered beneath low clouds, fishing boats moving slowly across the calm water as seabirds circled overhead. For a long moment, she simply stood there, breathing in the peaceful silence before returning to work. Meanwhile, several miles away, Richard Sterling sat alone in the back seat of his limousine without opening his laptop. The folded handwritten note rested once again inside his wallet, and Ava's employee identification card remained beside it. He had discovered the misplaced card only after leaving the hospital the previous afternoon. Returning it would have been simple enough through the hotel manager, yet something told him that would not be enough. He remembered the suspicion in his own voice, the distance in his own eyes, and the way she had accepted every question without anger. The memory unsettled him far more than any failed business negotiation ever had. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. Straight to headquarters this morning, sir? Richard remained silent for several seconds before answering. No, back to the hotel. The driver nodded and quietly changed direction. As the city passed outside, Richard watched people beginning ordinary mornings of their own. Construction workers gathered beside pickup trucks. Parents walked children toward school. A mail carrier crossed an intersection carrying a heavy canvas bag. Every face seemed busy. Every life carried invisible responsibilities. For years he had believed success placed him above the ordinary rhythm of everyone else. Now he wondered how many extraordinary people he had overlooked simply because they wore uniforms instead of expensive suits. Back at the hotel, Ava finished arranging fresh towels on a housekeeping cart before noticing the first luxury sedan pulling beneath the covered entrance. She paid little attention. Wealthy guests arrived every day. Some stayed one night. Others stayed a week. Most never remembered the names of the people who quietly kept everything spotless behind the scenes. She lowered her eyes and continued polishing the brass rail beside the revolving door until she heard familiar footsteps crossing the marble floor. They were slower this time. Unhurried. Intentional. She looked up. Richard Sterling had returned alone. No reporters surrounded him. No assistants hurried beside him. No security guard stepped ahead to clear his path. He carried only one worn black wallet in his hand as the soft morning light streamed through the glass behind him, and for the first time since Ava had met him, there was no trace of suspicion on his face. Richard stopped several feet away from Ava, leaving enough space that she would not feel cornered. The lobby around them continued its gentle morning rhythm, yet the quiet between them seemed to soften every other sound. Guests checked in at the reception desk. A pianist in the lounge began playing a slow melody that drifted through the open space like a calm tide. Sunlight filtered through the towering windows, catching tiny dust particles that floated through the air before disappearing again. Ava lowered the polishing cloth in her hand and offered the same courteous smile she gave every guest. "Good morning, sir." Richard looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." Hearing her last name spoken with respect instead of suspicion caught her slightly off guard. He held out her employee identification card. "I believe this belongs to you." Ava's eyes widened with quiet surprise. She reached into the pocket of her apron and immediately realized the plastic badge was missing. "Thank you," she said gently as she accepted it. "I did not even realize I had lost it." Richard nodded slowly. "I found it inside my wallet after I left the hospital." Ava looked puzzled. "Hospital?" Richard smiled faintly. "My daughter." He reached into his jacket and removed the folded note she had written. The paper had been opened and closed enough times that its edges had begun to soften. "You saved something far more valuable than this wallet." Ava glanced at the familiar handwriting and lowered her eyes modestly. "I only noticed your phone kept lighting up while I was picking it up. I thought maybe someone needed you." Richard looked toward the grand entrance where morning light spilled across the marble floor. "She did." His voice became quieter. "Because of your note, I arrived before her procedure. I was able to sit with her, hold her hand, and tell her I loved her before she went in." Ava's expression softened with genuine relief. "Is she all right?" "She is recovering well." Richard paused before adding the words that had weighed on him since the previous morning. "I almost missed that chance because I believed another meeting mattered more." Ava said nothing. She simply listened. Richard continued. "Yesterday I looked at you and assumed the worst before I knew anything about you. I questioned your honesty when all you had done was protect mine." Several hotel employees quietly noticed the conversation from across the lobby, though none interrupted. Richard took a slow breath. "Miss Brooks, I owe you an apology." Ava looked at him with calm eyes that carried neither resentment nor triumph. "You do not owe me anything, sir." Richard gently shook his head. "I do." His voice remained steady. "I judged you before I knew your character. That was unfair." Ava smiled with a kindness that seemed almost effortless. "Sometimes people only see the uniform before they see the person. I stopped taking that personally a long time ago." Her answer lingered in the air. Richard felt those simple words settle deeper than any criticism ever could. She had every reason to remind him of his mistake, yet she chose grace instead. He looked around the magnificent hotel lobby with fresh eyes. For the first time, he noticed the housekeepers arranging flowers before sunrise, the maintenance worker quietly repairing a loose handrail, the bellman helping an elderly couple with their luggage. They had always been there, making every guest's experience possible, yet he had rarely seen them beyond the roles they performed. Richard folded the handwritten note carefully and placed it back inside his wallet. It no longer represented a forgotten message. It had become a permanent reminder that true worth could never be measured by a job title, a bank account, or the color of someone's skin, but only by the quiet choices they made when nobody expected anything in return. The conversation ended without applause, yet something invisible had already changed. Richard slipped the wallet into his jacket and remained standing for another quiet moment before speaking again. "Miss Brooks, I came here thinking I should write you a very large check." Ava smiled politely, almost amused. "That is generous, sir, but I cannot accept money for returning something that was never mine." Richard searched her face, expecting hesitation or uncertainty. There was none. She had already made peace with that decision long before he arrived. "Then let me do something else," he said. Ava gently folded the polishing cloth in her hands. "If you truly want to thank me, there is something you can do." Richard listened carefully. "The housekeeping team works very hard. Some of them have been here for years. Most guests never learn their names. Sometimes people look through us instead of at us. Please remember them the next time someone quietly makes your day easier." Richard lowered his eyes. Those simple words carried more weight than any business lecture he had ever attended. They were not spoken with bitterness. They were offered with hope. The hotel manager, who had quietly approached during the conversation, stood frozen a few yards away. Several employees nearby had also paused without intending to interrupt. Richard turned toward them slowly. "May I borrow everyone for just a moment?" Within minutes, housekeepers, bell attendants, front desk associates, maintenance workers, and restaurant servers gathered near the center of the lobby. Guests glanced over curiously as the morning bustle slowed. Richard stepped forward, not onto a stage or behind a podium, but onto the same polished marble floor where he had doubted Ava only one day earlier. He looked around at the employees before speaking. "Yesterday I walked through this hotel believing I noticed everything that mattered." He paused briefly. "I was wrong." The room became completely still. "I overlooked the people whose work makes this place exceptional every single day. Worse than that, I questioned the honesty of someone whose character turned out to be stronger than my own." Several employees quietly exchanged surprised looks. Richard turned toward Ava. "Miss Brooks reminded me that integrity does not wear an expensive suit. It does not come with a title or a corner office. Sometimes it wears a housekeeping uniform and quietly does the right thing when nobody is watching." No one spoke. The silence itself seemed to honor the moment. Richard continued, "Beginning today, every employee recognition program across every Sterling property will include every department equally. Housekeeping, maintenance, kitchen staff, laundry services, security, everyone. Respect should never depend on visibility." The hotel manager nodded immediately, already understanding the significance of the decision. Ava looked genuinely surprised. She had never imagined that one returned wallet could influence policies reaching thousands of workers she would never meet. Richard smiled warmly for the first time since entering the hotel. "That change is not a gift to you. It is a lesson from you." Ava lowered her eyes, humbled rather than proud. "I only did what my mother taught me," she answered softly. "She always said that people remember how you make them feel long after they forget your name." Richard felt those words settle quietly inside him. Around them, the hotel slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Guests resumed checking in. Suitcases rolled across the marble floor once more. Coffee cups clinked softly inside the cafe. Yet everyone who had witnessed the exchange carried away something no reservation confirmation or business contract could ever provide. They had watched respect replace assumption, gratitude replace pride, and one quiet act of kindness ripple far beyond the person who first chose to do the right thing. 6 months passed almost quietly, measured not by headlines or business victories, but by small moments that carried lasting meaning. Autumn gradually gave way to winter before Charleston welcomed another gentle spring. Morning sunlight once again poured through the towering windows of the hotel lobby, painting long golden reflections across the marble floor where thousands of footsteps crossed every day. Much had changed, although at first glance everything looked exactly the same. Fresh flowers still decorated the reception desk. The piano still filled the afternoons with soft melodies. Guests still hurried through revolving doors chasing flights, meetings, vacations, and celebrations. Ava Brooks still arrived before sunrise wearing the same neatly pressed housekeeping uniform with the same calm smile that greeted every new day. She had not asked for a promotion. She had not requested a larger office because she did not have one. She had not tried to become famous for a single act of honesty. Instead, she continued making beds with care, polishing windows until they reflected the harbor like clear water, and quietly helping guests who rarely realized how much comfort depended upon people they almost never noticed. Yet something had undeniably changed. More guests now greeted housekeepers by name. Managers regularly thanked maintenance crews during staff meetings. Employee recognition boards displayed photographs from every department instead of only executives and supervisors. New training sessions reminded every new hire that respect was part of the hotel's standard of service. None of those changes carried Ava's name, yet her quiet influence lived inside every one of them. On one bright Saturday morning, Richard Sterling returned to the hotel once again, this time accompanied by Emily. She had recovered well and walked confidently beside her father, laughing as they crossed the sunlit lobby. Her smile carried an ease that had been missing for far too long. Richard noticed Ava arranging fresh flowers near the entrance and gently touched his daughter's arm before pointing toward her. Emily walked over first. "You must be Miss Brooks," she said warmly. Ava looked up with pleasant surprise. "Yes, I am." Emily smiled. "Thank you for giving me one more conversation with my father before my procedure. You may never know how much that meant to both of us." Ava's eyes softened. "I am very happy you are doing well." Richard joined them, carrying the same black leather wallet. The edges looked slightly more worn now from daily use. He opened it carefully and showed Ava the folded handwritten note still resting inside its familiar place. "I carry this every day," he said quietly. "Not because I might forget my meetings, but because I never want to forget what truly deserves my attention." Ava smiled gently. "Sometimes the smallest reminders stay with us the longest." Richard nodded. Neither of them felt the need to say anything more. Through the towering windows, warm sunlight flooded the lobby, catching the polished marble and filling the space with a quiet glow. Guests moved past them without knowing the story hidden inside one ordinary wallet. Somewhere a coffee cup rested softly against a saucer. The piano continued playing. Outside, a gentle breeze stirred the branches of the old oak trees lining the street. Richard slipped the wallet back into his pocket. Emily linked her arm through his, and Ava returned to arranging the flowers with the same quiet care she gave everything she touched. No applause followed. No cameras flashed. Justice arrived not with noise, but with understanding. And in the peaceful silence of another ordinary morning, kindness stood taller than wealth. Character spoke louder than assumption, and the woman so many people had once looked past became the reason countless others finally learned to truly see.